Alright, a little disclaimer before I get on to the intro and also the video. Please do not use this video as a dumping ground for political opinions. I am aware that a lot of the issues I talk about are heavily political here in America, but that doesn't mean I want these issues to be politicized on my channel. I don't think that hatred of people should be such a divisive issue in which one side feels justified to preach against someone else's existence. I just don't. Also, I may have some controversial opinions. While my comment section is open, that's only because I entrust y'all watching the videos to, not be ignorant pieces of shit. It's a shame I even have to make the disclaimer to possibly avoid this PSA compilation getting hatred, but I guess this is the state of internet politics. Oh, and before you go all out claiming, oh, these issues are exaggerated, they wouldn't have PSAs on them if they weren't truly issues. You know that, right? That being said, roll the intro, and let's get started on this video. So, the topic of hate actually has a lot of very shocking and effective PSAs that I feel like aren't talked about enough. And so I seek to change that, regardless of what kind of backlash I'll get from bigots and 14-year-old edgelords. These are issues that do need to be discussed, and to be honest, I'm surprised I haven't found any PSA compilations dealing with this subject. But I'm a sheep of my word, and I wanted to use at least one of the PSAs that were suggested to me in my comment section of the last videos. So, without any further ado, let's get on to the video and discuss the top 10 scariest anti-hate PSAs.
When you hate, who do you hurt the most? Hate hurts you.
Honestly, compared to a lot of the PSAs on this list, this one is pretty lighthearted, though I can see how this PSA would have scared a lot of 70s kids. Though there's something about 1970s PSAs that even the most lighthearted ones are rather creepy. But honestly, it's the fact that this comes off as an incredibly mocking song towards hateful people. Like, yeah, you're hurting our feelings, but at the end of the day, you're the one being hurt the most by your blind hatred. And I can't be the only one that thinks this hateful guy whose head explodes is supposed to represent a skinhead. I can't be the only one who thinks that. That being said, Being said, I think this PSA hits its message home pretty damn effectively, considering it's only 10 seconds.
I saw what you've been posting. Hitler was right. I didn't teach you that. You hide behind your screen, spewing all this hatred and ugliness. You got something you want to say? Get out of the truck and say it to their faces.
You know, it's honestly a shame that these series of PSAs even have to be made, because, for context, thanks to people like Kanye West, anti-Semitism is becoming, you know, kind of a cool thing among American kids. And I admit, in my edgier phase, I did make jokes about Hitler, and I did ironically say that I looked up to him, but when you really see these people that aren't really doing anything wrong to us, that are just living their lives, listening to preachers that make them happy, it really puts into perspective, like, how, you know, cruel the hate really is. Because at the end of the day, hey, it doesn't matter what your religion, race, sexuality, gender identity, any of that is. We're all, as my mother puts it, we're all one race, the human race. Hitler absolutely was not right, and the father is absolutely right in this PSA. It's easy to say all that racist and hateful shit on the internet because there's no real repercussions. But this father is arguably one of the best people I've ever seen in a PSA. It's slightly more serious than the last one was, but it's very effective for that reason, and it goes to show the art of the PSA isn't dead even in 2023.
This is one of the millions of Americans who uses drugs and won't get arrested. However, this American is several times more likely to be charged with a drug crime. Imagine it's you. This is the day you get caught. This is your day in court. This is your sentencing. This is your cell. This is your first day on the outside. This is your fresh start. Was your fresh start. Here are your job prospects. This is your shot at a college degree. Or not. This is your family. This is your debt collector. These are the dreams you have for your children. This is someone else's family. Someone else's life. Someone who used drugs, but was never caught. This is how you feel. The war on drugs is ruining people's lives. It fuels mass incarceration. It targets people of color in greater numbers than their white counterparts. It cripples communities. It costs billions. And it doesn't work. Any questions?
Alright, so I think this PSA is the first spin-off of a PSA that I've ever seen. You see, I shouldn't need to explain this is your brain on drugs to anyone who's part of the PSA community because, well, I'm sure every American is familiar with what this PSA is about. Oh, your egg is basically your brain is compared to an egg, and the frying pan is drugs. Essentially, they're trying to say the metaphor is drugs fry your brain. And this PSA actually talks about how drug policy disproportionately affects people of color. That's why it's on this list, is because, well, granted, Adam Ruins Everything isn't a 100% credible source of information, but I have read some of their sources, and the war on drugs essentially started because, well, it was a way for, conservatives to still stay in power. They could easily just lock up black people they suspected of having drugs. And well, there actually is a statement that said we couldn't just outright throw black people and hippies in jail. So the drug policy was the best thing that happened to us. Now, I can't really speak on issues relating to people of color because, well, I'm about as white as the sheep you see on my screen. But I still think this is a very interesting remake of This Is Your Brain on Drugs, criticizing the very policy that the original This Is Your Brain on Drugs PSA that Rachel Lee Cook appeared in was made for. It's absolutely amazing, and I love this PSA. But I will warn you guys, they just get darker from here. They just get darker from here. Oh wait, before I move on to the next entry, I should probably add for context that I think it was the Nixon administration that started the war on drugs, so that's the administration I was talking about. Hope that clears things up. Now on to the next PSA.
I just love this blush. Okay, a super easy step to get more natural looking lashes. Grab a pair of flat tweezers, separate the lashes one by one, and there we have it, a simple, beautiful eyelash.
What are you doing? We agreed you would stop this! Stop it! Why are you doing this again?
You know, it's not very common you see anti-hate PSAs revolving around anybody in the LGBT community. But I think this is the first PSA against hate that I've ever seen that revolves around trans people. And damn, it seems like everybody just hated everybody during the lockdown era. Because, well, I guess you just grow to hate the people you're around when they're all you really interact with. But honestly, this PSA was just heartbreaking because the protagonist was just living her life as the woman she was meant to be, and what I assume was her family were berating her for no real other reason than that ain't the son we raised. I know this PSA is British, but I just can't imagine conservative, hateful people with any other voice besides this southern accent. I'm sorry, but I digress. It truly is heartbreaking as we see the woman start considering detransitioning just to stop the horrible mistreatment thrown her way, and that's where we see the big reveal that she is trans. And to be honest, from the beginning, with her voice alone, I wouldn't have been able to tell that. It's honestly a very powerful PSA, and it's a shame that it even had to be made because it's incredibly relevant in America given the current political war surrounding trans people. Now, I admit, as a non-binary person, I'm lucky to live in a more accepting state. Because if I didn't, I could very well be going through the situation that the woman in this PSA is going through. And I don't know if I'd be able to handle it, because we see her have an absolute mental breakdown. Honestly, an incredibly powerful PSA, and one I feel like should be talked about more.
A piece of meat in the shape of a man without a mind is not a human being. Whether the body be deathly ill, damaged by accident, mentally blank because of brain deficiency, or criminally insane. Those people who are so mentally defective that they cannot live in society should, as soon as they are identified as defective, be humanely dispatched.
Alright, I've talked about this PSA before in my top 20 favorite PSAs, but that's because I think it is one of the most effective anti-hate PSAs I have ever seen. You don't really see that many PSAs about hatred towards disabled people. And honestly, it disgusts me to think that there were not only still people in 1995, but people still today thinking like this. It really goes to show ignorance is still the most debilitating disease on society. Because to be honest, we're all human. No matter what, we are all human. what it really is normal. Who's to say someone with a disability would be any less of a benefit to society than an able-bodied but ignorant Mensa member? Seriously. This PSA is incredibly effective, and it's more what the quote is saying that makes me find it so disturbing. Because I know that this is stuff people would actually still say today. Alright, even sped up, this PSA from Viacom CBS in the wake of George Floyd's death is pretty effective, because the simplicity of it is meant to, exemplify how brutal his death was. Unlike most people that were victims of police brutality, George wasn't shot to death, but rather, well, I've got conflicting reports. Some say he died of a drug overdose that was only exacerbated by having his neck kneeled on. Some say it was the action of having his neck kneeled on itself that led to his death. Personally, I believe it was a matter, Hicks, of both, but either way, it was still a cruel action on the behalf of the officer. Now, I didn't agree with what the movements against police brutality, devolved into, which were very destructive riots that just created more bigots, but I do agree with the message of this PSA. Too many people have been killed due to stereotypes, and it's not okay. Like, what makes this PSA all the more unnerving is it goes on for the amount of time that George Floyd had his neck kneeled on. With the phrase, "I can't breathe," which were his last words, being repeated. Now, I don't care what your political views are, but I don't think anyone deserves to be treated in such a way by the people meant to protect them. I'm not saying all cops are bad. In fact, Most of the police I know are genuinely dedicated to protecting the public. But we can't pretend that the bad ones do not exist. We cannot pretend that. That being said, I think this PSA, regardless of whether it's in its full length or sped up, is incredibly effective.
Hi. Can I get the now bar, please?
No problem. $1.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Got it.
Yeah, I'll be home in like 15 minutes. Hi, can I get a now bar, please? Uh-huh.
$1.
Thanks.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey.
Hey, let me get a now bar.
Sure. $1.
Appreciate you.
You got it.
How's it going?
25, code 6, 105 North End.
Can I get a now bar?
Hey, stop right there! Listen, get down on the ground! Out of your pocket, you think! Look over your head! All right, take it down. Go! Take that, watch out! 765, this is 15-minute ATS of 0021.
Alright, so this PSA is another one that talks about police brutality. And to be honest, it's quite a visceral PSA of America because, well, it shows how pervasive stereotypes are. As the man turns out and politely buys a candy bar that is mistaken for a gun and is apparently killed by the police who think the candy bar is a gun for no other reason than they saw a report of a black man committing some sort of crime and he was and it happened to be late at night. Now, this PSA is quite effective, and I think it does need to be talked about more. Or because, well, it doesn't talk down to the viewer, and it shows that people will continue to overstep their boundaries if nothing is done by the people. Hence the organization's name, Courageous Conversation. Honestly, an S-tier PSA, and one I really do hope to see talked about more. I highly thank one of my commenters for suggesting it to me.
Here's one time it doesn't matter who your neighbor is. Here's the other. Life's too short. Stop the hate.
I know. 2 PSAs in this countdown that I've talked about before. I promise this video will mark a new rule. I can only talk about how a certain PSA twice on the channel because, well, I know y'all don't want to see me talk about the same PSAs over and over again. I still stand by my point that this is an incredibly underrated PSA. Hey, and arguably one of the ad council's scariest ones to date. Just the klaxon is very unnerving, as well as the imagery, and the fact that we hear the klaxon is actually a clipped woman's scream. Just everything about this PSA is chilling. But it sends a very good message. That message being that life is too short to dedicate it to hate. It really fucking is. And I think that's a lesson that needs to be taught more. Life is simply too short to spend dedicating it to hate. Exactly. So, I'm not sorry for talking about this PSA again, because it's got a message that is especially relevant in our time.
In South Africa, 14 babies in every 1,000 die in infancy. White babies, that is. As many as a quarter of all black babies will die before they are 1 year old. Life expectancy in South Africa can be quite good. The average white will live well past 70. The average non-white never reaches 60. The World Health Organization says that 1 doctor per every 500 people is a healthy ratio. White South Africans have 1 doctor for every 330. Most blacks share a doctor with more than 19,000 others. So if you buy a Cape apple today, you really are helping to keep the doctor away.
This get a... Alright, how in the hell did this get a U rating? Damn. 80s British age ranking was incredibly off, because, to be honest, I don't exactly think this subject is one that is quite all that great for little kids to be hearing about. But I suppose these PSAs did help to, stop the clock on apartheid, since as of 1995, it no longer federally exists in South Africa, but this PSA is quite unnerving, to be honest. Like, the babies are cute and all, but it's the facts we hear that, like, these babies, they don't see the color of each other's skin. They're just babies. They're happy to be with each other. But circumstances, because of how they were born, would have defined their lives. And that is honestly the sad part about this. That's the sad part about this, to be honest. And that music is pretty chilling. It seems almost threatening. However, the one thing that keeps this from being at the top spot is because, well, it's the fact that people are saying this PSA is more racist than the government it was criticizing, because of the fact that a British woman was doing a mock South African accent. And yeah, that's probably not politically correct these days, but keep in mind, this PSA was made in the 80s. It would be like 10 years before political correctness really became a thing.
Do you know where you're going to? Do you like the things that life is showing you? Where are you going to? Do you know?
Civil unrest rocked the province last night on a scale not seen in many years. The leaders of the four main churches say they're very concerned at the boycott of some Protestant businesses by Catholics.
An 18-year-old man has been treated for leg injuries after being beaten by a gang of men wielding iron bars and baseball bats.
A West Belfast teenager crucified to a wooden fence with metal spikes through his knees and elbows last week. There have been angry scenes at Drumcree within the past half hour.
A crowd of about 400 stopped mass from taking place in Harryville last
And workers forced out of their jobs.
The victim was attacked at a house.
It's a miracle no one was killed or maimed. A Ballinahinch bomb blast was an attempt at mass murder.
Yet again, another PSA I find disturbing, not for the reason you'd think. Yes, the toys coming alive and taking on a lot more of an aggressive appearance is scary, but it's more the news lines that I find disturbing. As a lot of the headlines revolve around religious sectarian violence. I'm talking like rivalries between Protestants and Catholics, which unfortunately is a religious sectarian feud that has been going on for centuries. Like, I don't know what it is, but Protestants and Catholics historically just don't get along very well. Ironic considering I'm a Catholic and one of my best online friends is a Protestant. But one of the most chilling headlines you hear on the radio in this PSA is that a 17-year-old was crucified to a fence through his hands and feet. We also hear another teenager that was beaten to a pulp. Like, that's what especially makes these headlines disturbing, is the fact that most of the violence you can clearly hear on the radio was committed against teenagers. That was the disturbing part about this. But the PSA does take a hopeful turn, saying that if we heal this hate, we ensure a better future for our youngest generation, and who I would assume are in their 20s at this point in time. But this countdown must come to an end eventually, so if you liked this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment, preferably not a political one on this video. And if you've done all those things, y'all have a great day. Hey, my divine ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary daisies. Y'all have a great day. Peace. Oh, and also before I forget, I'll be showing a plug to my Discord in 3, 2, 1, and it will also be shown in the description.